Before digital wallets, before plastic cards, even before the modern banking system, there was something people trusted far more than numbers on a screen. They trusted weight. They trusted metal. They trusted gold. For centuries, gold wasn't just valuable. It was money. It gleamed in the vaults of kings, lined the pockets of empires, and backed the promise behind every banknote. But then, it was gone. In 1971, the United States broke the link between gold and the dollar. And the world has never been the same. So why did we walk away from one of the oldest systems of trust in human history? And what did it cost us? Because when money was backed by gold, it wasn't just wealth. It was accountability. And today, we're living in the world that was built when we left that accountability behind. This is the story of the gold standard. When money meant metal. Gold is older than money, but it's always been money. The first use of gold coins dates back over 2,600 years, to Lydia, in modern-day Turkey. Since then, gold has crossed oceans, toppled empires, and funded revolutions. It doesn't rust. It's hard to fake. And above all, it's rare. Its beauty made it desirable. Its scarcity made it valuable. Gold doesn't rely on politicians or printing presses. It's not created in committee meetings. It's mined from the earth. That's why, for millennia, when people lost trust in governments, in currencies, in institutions, they ran to gold. It's not just a shiny metal. It's a mirror of human psychology, our desire for certainty, for fairness, for something real. By the 1800s, the world had changed. Trade between nations was booming. Industrialization connected continents. But there was one problem. Exchanging gold was slow, heavy, and risky. So countries created a solution. They issued paper money, but every note was redeemable for a fixed weight in gold. That was the birth of the gold standard. Money was no longer just metal. It was a promise. The British Empire led the charge in 1821. Germany, France, and the United States soon followed. By the early 1900s, most of the developed world was tied to gold. It was elegant, simple, transparent, and most importantly, it disciplined governments. If they printed too much money, they had to hand over gold. No more reckless spending without consequences. But gold's discipline had a cost, especially in war. When World War I broke out, governments suspended gold convertibility. They needed to fund weapons, soldiers, supplies, and gold was in the way. So they printed, and by the time the war ended, so did people's faith in paper. Hyperinflation swept through Germany. The mark became worthless. People pushed wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. In 1925, the UK returned to gold, but at the wrong price. It strangled the economy. And 5 years later, the Great Depression began. The world realized something painful. Gold was stable, but not always flexible. Still, it wasn't over yet. After World War II, the global economy was shattered. Europe was in ruins. Asia was devastated. But America stood strong, and rich in gold. In 1944, at a quiet hotel in New Hampshire, delegates from 44 countries met. Their goal, to build a new system of international finance. The result, the Bretton Woods Agreement. From now on, all major currencies would peg their value to the US dollar. And the US dollar? It would be pegged to gold, $35 per ounce. This made the dollar the center of global trade. It made America the custodian of global trust. And it worked, for a while. By the 1960s, cracks were forming again. The US was fighting a costly war in Vietnam. It launched massive domestic programs. It printed dollars, lots of them. But every dollar was still supposed to be backed by gold. Soon, foreign governments began to worry. France demanded its gold. Other countries followed. They realized the US had printed more dollars than it had gold to redeem. It was a run on the bank, a global one, and America had to choose. Keep bleeding gold, or break the promise. On August 15, 1971, a Sunday evening, Americans tuned in to hear their president. Richard Nixon said, "I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold." That temporary suspension became permanent. And with that, the gold standard was dead. For the first time in modern history, no currency in the world was backed by metal. Money became fiat, backed by faith alone. The consequences, we're still living them. What happens when governments can print without restraint? Answer, they do. Since 1971, U.S. national debt has soared from $400 billion to over $34 trillion. The dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. And inflation, though hidden in averages, eats away at everyday life. Your rent, your groceries, your savings, they all cost more, for reasons most people don't understand. Without gold, money becomes easier to create, but harder to trust. Yet gold hasn't gone away. It still sits in central banks. It still spikes during crises. It still whispers to the world, "Remember me?" And now, something new has emerged. Bitcoin. A digital asset with a fixed supply. No central bank. No printer. No inflation. Some call it the new gold. Others call it a scam. But either way, it's a response to fiat fatigue. Scarcity is powerful. Because in a world flooded with paper and credit, people start searching again for something real. The gold standard was never perfect. It was rigid, unforgiving, sometimes cruel. But it had one thing that fiat money lacks: discipline. You couldn't just print your way out of problems. You had to earn, mine, save. Today, we live in a world built on confidence. Confidence in central banks. Confidence in governments. Confidence that inflation will stay under control. But history says otherwise. When money loses its anchor, trust drifts, prices rise, and ordinary people pay the price. So no, we may never go back to gold. But if you want to understand where we're going, you need to understand what we left behind. Money is more than math. It's a story, told by those in power. And sometimes, the story changes. If this documentary helped you see money a little differently, help us tell more stories like it. Subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who still thinks the dollar is backed by something. Comment below, should we return to gold, or keep moving forward? Because in a world where money is made of promises, the only real asset is understanding. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and don't forget, money wasn't always this light.